Let's now speak to Con Coughlin. If you go to the Daily Telegraph today, Con has a feature there where he's talking about the oligarchs surrounding Vladimir Putin and how the whole thing works. You've heard what James had to say there, Con, as well. And we were trying to envisage a Russia post-Putin. He says it may not be that much different.
Well, I think James has made some good points there. And I think, as he said, in this sort of almost czarist system that you have in Moscow, they don't really think much about successions. You know, once you get the job, you're there for life. But, you know, I think this move into Ukraine is not very popular within the sort of ruling establishment in Moscow. And as I write in the Telegraph today, the fact that some of the most prominent oligarchs in Russia, people who've been known as Putin loyalists over the last 20 years, are now making muted criticisms. They're not directly attacking Putin, but they are certainly raising questions about whether the invasion of Ukraine is the right policy. And I find this quite fascinating. I mean, the whole Kremlinology of what is going on in Russia is one of the backstories to the terrible events unfolding in Ukraine. And when the oligarchs, I think that there's a figure I saw, there's 116 billionaires that control, you know, a vast amount of Russia's wealth. This is a very important constituency in Russia. And when they express reservations about what's going on in Ukraine, and when you've got people like Roman Abramovich, the current owner of Chelsea, soon not to be, going on his own private diplomatic mission to try and end the fighting, then you start to see cracks in the edifice, which, if nothing else, are fascinating.
You've picked up on that in your piece in the Telegraph today. I've also spotted a couple of lines on it in the Mail today, and this is based on his private jet records, the flight path being tracked from, I think, the south of France to the Belarusian border, where those peace talks were being held on Monday, and then on to the Kremlin. A really interesting position for him then, a unique position, I suppose, as one of the oligarchs, because, of course, he's a fiercely loyal ally of Putin. He's never, even now, spoken out in criticism of him, and yet he has the trust of Zelensky. Just tell us why. Well,
one of the sort of lesser-known aspects of Roman Abramovich's activities is he's a very prominent campaigner against anti-Semitism. He comes from a Jewish family, and also the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is Jewish, and some of his family perished in the Ukrainian Holocaust. So there is a sort of religious link there. And Zelensky trusts Abramovich. You have to remember, I mean, one of the tragedies of this conflict in Ukraine is that it's a bit like England going to war with Wales. I mean, the ties between Russia and Ukraine are very deep. They are like brothers. And so you have this bizarre situation where you have somebody, a prominent member of the Kremlin's inner circle, Roman Abramovich, having a very close personal bond with the president of Ukraine, who technically is the sworn enemy of Moscow. So it's a bizarre situation. But you do have Abramovich moving into this position where he's trying to use his connections to try and diffuse tensions. Now, what happens when he goes to the Kremlin and says to Putin, if he saw Putin, we don't even know that he saw Putin, but if he goes to the Kremlin and says, look, I've spoken to Zelensky, he's prepared to do X, Y, and Z to end this conflict, is he making any headway? So, and I'd also say, I mean, the British government and others are drawing up new lists of oligarchs to sanction and everything else. But if you've got somebody like Abramovich who can be a useful interlocutor to end this war, then is it right to hit them with sanctions and isolate them?
Is that why, then, do you think that the Prime Minister was evasive in his response to Keir Starmer and PMQs yesterday about why Abramovich isn't being chased in terms of sanctions?
Well, I think there's an element of that, actually. And I mean, the Labour Party, of course, as the official opposition, will be looking for any chink of weakness in the government's armour. And one of the things they've been arguing over the last few days is that the measures proposed by the British government with regard to the oligarchs are not strong enough. They don't go far enough. There's still too much dirty Russian money sloshing around London, etc. But I think, yes, you saw the Prime Minister give a rather more nuanced response when directly challenged about Abramovich. I mean, I think Abramovich has indicated that so far as his future is concerned, it will not be in the UK. He's put Chelsea up for sale. He's going to sell his vast mansion in Kensington, and he'll be off elsewhere. And that is one of the consequences of this appalling action by Putin.
But let's talk about Putin. If these oligarchs between them decide the best interests of Russia, or indeed the best interests of their wealth, is not served by Vladimir Putin, who actually tells them, Con? Because we're dealing with not only a terrorist here, we're dealing with a mafiosa leader, we're dealing with a gangster here. Who would actually have the guts or the wherewithal or the backup, the muscle to tell him?
Well, that is the $64,000 question, Eamon. I mean, the thing about Putin, and I've been watching him for 20-odd years, I actually met him when he first became president in St. Petersburg in 2001. And since then, he has very cleverly and efficiently suppressed all the opposition, all his rivals, so that, as you say, he's now the supreme mafia don in Moscow. And you just showed that picture of him sitting with his defense minister and the chief of the Russian armed forces. They are forced to sit 20 feet away from him. So, I mean, they are trained soldiers. If they wanted to take a swipe at him, that possibility has been denied just by the length of the conference table. These are the measures he will go to protect himself. And he is surrounded by yes men, lots of loyalists from his old days in the KGB. So there's this clique at the heart of the Kremlin, which is very hard to dislodge. I suspect it wouldn't be the oligarchs, it would be the military that moved in if there were to be a palace coup. Okay.
Well, you're witnessing, and you write today about a level of dissent, whatever that level is, rearing its head. Con, if you had a crystal ball in front of you there, what would your prediction be? How long is he likely to last? As we say, he turned 70 this year. He's got all the money he could want or need, probably in the hands of his oligarch friends. What's the future for him?
Well, as I said, I think for the reason I just outlined, Eamon, I think it's very difficult to see him being ousted. But I see him becoming a rather sad Mugabe figure. Remember, Mugabe in Zimbabwe hung on for years and years as his whole country collapsed around him. And I can see this happening to Russia, that because it's very difficult to deal with a mafia don, you will see Russia, as these sanctions bite, as its isolation deepens, just become a failed state. And you will have a failed president running a failed state, still living this deluded life that he's the head of Imperial Russia.
Gosh, how depressing.
So
but
depressing.
What an insight, Con. Yeah, but, you know, it's just fascinating to talk to you because you have that insight and, as you say, history often repeats itself as well. Fascinating talking to you, Con. Good article, great article from him in the Daily Telegraph today. Thank you very much indeed. Con Coughlin is the Defence and Foreign Affairs Editor at the Daily Telegraph.